plans and getting an agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the man I call the Charlie Popper of breakfast, Dr. John Henry Clarke. Let's stand up and give him an applause.
Appreciate being here again. The subject for tonight is Martin Luther King, Beyond the Dream. One of the reasons why I keep speaking on Martin Luther King, keep projecting beyond the dream, because too many times we get so tied up with the dream we miss the man. We get so tied up with the speech. We forget the other things he said, the other things he did. We point out some mistakes he made, and no man ever walked this earth without making some mistakes. Now that there's a book out on him, about 4 pages of smut, it's a big book now, only 4 pages of smut. You're more interested in the smut than the fact that this man sacrificed himself and his time, his energy, and put his own life on the line and lost it in our freedom struggle. You're missing the man, and you are missing to look at the fact that you must be the carekeeper. You must be the gatekeeper. You must be the guardian of the personalities who devote their time and their life trying to make this world better for you. Now, a process of colonization of great African-American personalities, great African personalities, has been set in motion. And this colonization has taken over to the point where they are giving us personalities that did not exist. White writers and some black writers too are giving us an Nkrumah that didn't exist. They're giving us a Langston Hughes that didn't exist. They've already given us a Paul Robeson that didn't exist. There's a big book about Paul Robeson. A book written by the best white homosexual who's looking for the sexual deviance in Paul's life. He can't find it, so he invents that. He wants someone to be like him. So he's inventing things, and people who know Paul Robeson know that this is not, has no basis in truth. Now, if you get so hung up with a few pages of smut, you're going to forget to really look at Martin Luther King and his role in our freedom movement at the second half of the 20th century. And you're going to look at the dream, but you're going to forget the plan. Now, the I've Got a Dream speech was really, in substance, the least significance of all the speeches, of the many speeches he made. It was the one speech he said the least. It was the one speech which he dealt with fantasy and other than reality. And a speech where he dealt with certain things that wasn't even necessary. He got a dream that one day he see a little black boy and a little white girl hand in hand on the... Who in the hell care whether they ever get together so long as both of them have jackets? Integration in itself, physical integration, was never our aim. We wanted justice. And once you got justice, what other relationship you make from that point is a personal matter. deal with the 4 pages of smut and the man who allegedly wrote the 4 pages of smut, Abernathy. In the first place, Abernathy can't write that well. You know it's ghost. You know a ghost wrote. Because his name has some notoriety, and the subject of Martin Luther King sells books. They would get a ghost to write the book, and he signs it. He gives the ghost basic information. The ghost writes the book. He takes half of the profit. This is where it was done. I was offered a book that could have been smuttier than that one by another person in the King camp. He's going to call it All the King's Men. That was going to be an exposure to end all exposure. A publisher was going to give $25,000 advance for me. That means $50,000 advance. That means before you start writing. Look how interested they are in smut. Truth, they wouldn't give a nickel. I turned it down. I didn't need the money. I didn't need that kind of money. I didn't even want that kind of thing on my conscience. A ghost wouldn't write the book because he couldn't sustain the smut well enough to keep a lawsuit down, so it didn't get written. Now what we have to deal with here is something that is not just a part of Abernathy. Let's deal with something that is a part of most of us. The starvation of the ego. Because our egos are sometimes so starved. We want to take a bow sometime in life. We want a little pat on the back sometime in life. We want to give a hug sometime in life. And you stand by somebody, you ain't getting all those things, and you're in the life. You're in the light, but you're not in the limelight. Why not me? Faith, a God, a nature that gives out charisma to people is very stingy. Very few people have charisma. Marcus Garvey had it. Malcolm X had it. Quite a few other people had it. Du Bois, the greatest single intellect we produced outside of Africa, had the greatest body of knowledge of any black man who ever lived in the Western world, but no charisma, no sparkle. Dulled out right in front of your eyes. And yet he spoke well.
Yeah.
Harvard accent, of course. Wax mustache, spats, cane, gloves, very fine. But yet he never found that vocabulary that communicates with the lowest man in his audience and the highest man simultaneously without talking down or up to either one of them. Malcolm X could do it. And Marcus Garvey could do it. And Martin Luther King could do it. Martin Luther King had one kind of charisma. Malcolm X had another. When Malcolm X spoke, the next day, his message was so clear, you could whistle it. When King spoke, he massaged your ego and your spirit in such a way. You remember the next day he spoke so pretty and spoke so well, but you wasn't too clear about what he said. But you know he said it so beautifully. The style. Some people have style, and they can get away with things by virtue of style. British oppression in the West Indies, some people think I beat this little horse too much. Have given the West Indies the fact that they didn't even have slavery. If racism wasn't as blatant as the West Indies is here in the United States. Now, if you want to argue with me about whether my slave master it was worse than your slave, better, I'll concede. Mine was the worst. The American white planted the scum of the hood. Not only the oppressor, he's an oppressor with no style. No pretense.
That's true.
He's cool.
That's good.
He will cut your throat with a dirty knife. He ain't got enough style to clean the knife. But an Englishman will clean the knife because it's hard. It's good and hard. Style. Some people, by virtue of the personality and the lack of it, don't have enough style to attract people. And sometimes nature gives to certain people charisma without giving them a program worth listening to. Some people got charisma and no message. Generally, people with the charisma has a message. Now, what should you concentrate on if you look at Martin Luther King beyond the dream? He got to the rallies on time. He made the speeches on time. He did what was asked of him on time. Seeing him with 3 women in one night talking doesn't mean that he has a relationship with 3 in one night. It's an exaggeration for anybody to assume that you can do justice to 3 in one night in the first place. And if someone saw him with 3 and reported with 3, it could be a matter of envy that he couldn't even attract one. Didn't have the style, didn't have the charisma, didn't have the sparkle. Now, a man in his position naturally, normally would attract a lot of people and a lot of women. That in itself does not mean that there's always a physical culmination of the attraction. I am not defending the king. I have no evidence one way or the other, and I do not dignify rumors to the point of convicting people on the basis of rumors. What I'm talking about tonight, when I get the front matter out of the way, is a comparative study between Martin Luther King and the radical black ministers who were more dynamic than Martin Luther King, who were antecedents of Martin Luther King, and who made it possible for Martin Luther King to emerge. We look at him as a singular personality. He was not a singular personality. He came out of generations of black ministers, generations of black people who advocated peace, including Akhenaten, who advocated peace from the throne. He had a special kind of humanity that has reflected in African people through the ages. And this is why we have always been hospitable to strangers. We have many times invited the wrong kind of stranger in our house as our guest, and the stranger became the conqueror. because we had something in us and we still have it in spite of the fact we bang on each other too much. We have a special kind of humanity that sometimes we transfer to other people because we say, I wouldn't do that. So you assume that the stranger wouldn't do it either. But the stranger did not come from your culture. The stranger did not come from your geography. And the stranger did not come from your environment. Mm-hmm. Now let me illustrate the point because it has something to do with today, although I'm going to go way back. You know, I maintain that all history is a current event. Everything that ever happened continues to happen. And that the first man that sneezed is still influencing the atmosphere. And the first kid that threw a pebble in the ocean is still influencing the ocean and will influence it for all time to come. We came out of a holistic society where everything related to everything and everybody. We were not individual. And we were asked, what group do you belong to? Is this the territory of your tribe? Did your king send you over here? Everybody belonged to somebody. And everybody had a responsibility to everybody else. And today, when you see a halfway job cat walking around the street, hey, how things going, man? He says, everything is everything. You don't know how philosophical that is. Everything is everything. That's true. Everything is a part of everything. Everything is part of a total unit that goes into the making of the universe. But if you came from one environment and another person came from another environment, he reflects what that environment did to him. So let me draw you an example. Let's keep history back 10,000 years. Let's look at that European in that snow. The seasons are short. He's got 4 months to harvest, to store, to plant, harvest, and snow, and store. Everybody has to work because when the snow comes again, he must have some food and have it stored away in the cave so he can eat it. Sometimes the food don't last. So nobody can sit around in that snow. If he got angry with his wife or his woman and said, get out, she had to cover bleed. Because she knows if she get out there all alone, it's death. So from the beginning, the European woman was on her knees to the European man asking for mercy. And to a certain extent, she's still doing it. She's a slave on the air-conditioned auction block. The only difference between her auction block and ours is she's got a cleaner auction block, but she's still a slave on the auction block for sale. Now, let's look at Africa 10,000 years ago. The woman has already started agriculture, the basis of food. She peeked the man's hand every time she looked. Well, honey, I'm going on the hunt. See, now, she's planting some vegetables and all those things near the house. Now, we got enough food right here. Let me stay home. So for many years, he became a vegetarian. All right. The forest is a drugstore. Every time he has any aches and pains, if she goes out and finds the leaves, the bark, or the oil to put together to cure him. She keeps him strong, she keeps him healthy. She fixes the food he eats. She gathers the food that he eats. She cleans the food that he eats. She living in a tropical climate where land is plentiful. Suppose he did, first he ain't gonna play the fool and say get out, but suppose he did lose his mind, tip a word and tell her to get out. Get out where? Who's gonna take care of you? She got plenty of places to go now. She got family connection. She got uncle connection. And when you tell her to get out, you got to deal with 20 uncles, 50 cousins. You can all examine his mind. Now can you understand why there's no white visas in Africa? No white deserters in Africa? No teenage pregnancy in Africa? You had a connection, a unified family connection. No prostitution. What you gonna be a prostitute about? No basis for some of the degeneracy in our society. One of the great enduring civilizations of the world, not only no network of jails, no word in their language that meant jail. Now how can you call him primitive? He hasn't got a jail. He hasn't got a psychiatrist. Never heard of a hair straightener. This is why right now when you go to a psychiatrist, the first thing he asks, how's your sex life? Well, sex life is all right. How you get along with mama? Get along with mama's fine. Mama's good. Every time I want $10, mama give me 10 in a day. So the white psychiatrist, now what are you crazy about? He don't know that we can have a pleasant sex life, get along with mama, and still be crazy as hell about something else. When we go out of our mind, we go out for one reason. When he go out of his mind, he go out for another reason. This is why Western psychiatry doesn't fit our case, because they don't know what to say to us, and they don't know how to cure the case. A black man went to a psychiatrist. He had a first wife, he loved his little girl, nice home, got along with every member of his family. You want to know what he's crazy about? He's been on a job for a number of years. He got a minor promotion for nothing made. Here's a white man who came on the job 2 years before, who's now an executive, and he helped to train this man. The man is an executive, and he had moved beyond the shop. What he's frustrated about is he's got more talent than the president of the company. But it's a decent job, as jobs go. Not paid too well, not paid too badly. His wife advised him to keep the job and accept the amount of humiliation. His mother and his mother-in-law said, keep the job after all. You know, where else you gonna get that kind of salary? And halfway decent as salary goes. And what's he frustrated about? You have humiliated him. You have impinged on his ego as a man. Men don't supposed to let this happen to them. When this happens to a man's supposed to leave or tell somebody to go to hell, or rock the boat, or do something. He don't supposed to just take it and be quiet. That's precisely what he came to a psychiatrist to talk about. And the psychiatrist don't know how to talk about this because the psychiatrist is a part of the problem.
Right.
The society of the psychiatrist is a part of the problem. You have created a society where you said that upward mobility is for a certain group of people. you denied a man who have enough talent to train a person who's an executive, but not enough talent, not enough recognized talent to be an executive. And he's frustrated. He's angry. He don't know exactly where he's going to find the next job, and he's got notes to do, and his little mortgages, and his child is in school, and shoes need to be paid for, and he got things under control now. But he don't know what he can have under control if he had to look for a job for 2 or 3 months. He'd be wiped out. He don't want to face this. They don't want to continue to face the humiliation of being bossed by people with less talent than he is. See, now, the black man faces this kind of dilemma. And when he comes home to his ever-loving, and he can't explain it to her, what's he going to do? She said, baby, quit the job. We'll make it somehow. You find another one. But the basic comfort is nice, and things are in order, and bills are being paid. And she advised him to stick it out. It's better than what you can get some other place. I'm still talking about Martin Luther King Beyond the Dream because I'm talking about a people. And Martin Luther King came out of a people. I want to get some front matter out of the way before I go back and deal with the historical antecedents. We let certain things happen to Martin Luther King that should not have happened. We let certain things happen to him after his death that shouldn't have happened. He didn't need no holiday. If we needed a holiday, we could make the holiday. We didn't have to involve the nation in it. A holiday that we declared. We didn't have to take a day off. Something that is distinctly ours. Once we involved his opposition in the creation of the holiday, they created a holiday and created a personality that fit into the holiday. And their emphasis is on nonviolence. Here's a colored man who decided not to hit us. So we take a day off and drink to his memory. They're saying that Martin Luther King was not revolutionary. And I said he was revolutionary. But he was revolutionary in a special kind of way that his enemies could not understand, because they would not dare try anything as morally high as nonviolence. And as morally high as it is, I can go along with it only so far.
All right.
After the bus boycott, I'm a string reporter for the Pittsburgh Courier. I go down and cover the story. I meet Martin Luther King. He takes time off. John Killings with me, the late John Killings with me. He's busy all day. He takes time to take us to a restaurant. And every time he takes us to a place, no one lets us pay the bill. He takes time out. He goes to the house and gets his little child and rides her around with his daughter. Buys her some ice cream. Takes her back home. Now, whatever else he was a warm and loving father. Now, you might say being a warm and loving father and talking to 3 women one night is a contradiction. It's not a contradiction. And even if he had relationship to it, there's no proof that he did. That did not rule out that his life functioned on the level of being an attentive father, and that he proved that he wasn't faking it. There's something you cannot fake. And that he was as close to his children as time would permit. being busy night, day, and traveling a great deal. Now, what I'm trying to get at is that in this atmosphere, immediately after the bus boycott, King did not want the leadership of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He did not want it. He did not seek it. Dixon decided this is the forgotten man in the whole civil rights movement. A Pullman poet named Dixon. He was the activist. He was a man that not only did not believe in nonviolence, wouldn't leave his house without his piece in his back pocket. Everybody knew he had it, including the police, and nobody crossed his path. You know, that's one you better not tamper. He propositioned Abernathy to tell King, I think you better head this movement. Why he wanted King to head the movement is because this is a college town, Montgomery. The black middle class is very serious about people who use the English language well. Dixon not only split infinity, he created some new ones. And he wasn't about to change his English to suit anybody. He was rough and he intended to stay rough. But he was the activist. He had planned this attack on the bus. He planned with one woman, and when, just at the day she was to get on the bus, he discovered that she wasn't married to the child, the mother, the father of her child. He personally could care less about this situation because illegitimate is a word we didn't invent. It's a word that come out of white sociology. That if a woman is pregnant and the child develops and comes down the birth canal in the normal human way and comes out and is born, that child is as legitimate as any human being that walks the earth. Whether the mother is married to the father is a social matter of another caliber. We're sorry about that, but that does not make the child illegitimate. We have never considered the fact of whether a woman is married to the father or not illegitimate. When my grandfather died and left a little sum of money, a few $1,000, nothing big, he wanted all the money to go to the children in the family under 12 that can trace their bloodlines to our family, whether the father was married to the mother or not. When it finally got down to my child, I only had one then. It was only $7. But he looked from Alabama to Georgia, and those who migrated to Chicago and Birmingham. All of those children got a little piece. And he made no distinction between who was married or who was not married, so long as they related in blood. If the father came from our family or the mother came from our family, he got the money. That was respect for this occasion. All right, now, Dixon knew that the whites would make bad copy if this kind of black woman got on the bus and refuses to move back. Whites would focus on the fact that she wasn't married to the father of her child. And he didn't want that. so fine when he picked. Now this is picked. Freedom has to be planned.
Right.
It's no accident. This is freedom planning. So when he picked Rosa Parks, he had someone that they could not challenge no kind of way. She had one man and she still had she worked, he worked. The seamstress in the community. Her reputation was pure. You have to understand the African concept of virginity, which is different from Europeans. The African can see a woman with 9 children. And if her reputation is good, if she's not a liar, if she keeps a promise, the African will look at her and say with admiration, her mouth is sweet, she speaks the truth, her skirt is clean, she is virgin. Now you got a concept of virginity that comes out of the conference at Nicaea when they were changing an African religion called Christianity into a European religion that I call Christendom. You have accepted a definition of this religion that came from the people who have defiled and betrayed the religion. You have accepted a definition of morality that has come from the people who defiled and betrayed this religion. We have to begin to define religion and personality based on our own measurement. Sometimes our measurement is stricter, but our measurement tends to deal with reality more than other measurements. This is why at an early age in human history, we dealt with the woman in a manner that not only guaranteed her equality in the society, made her one of the first female gods of human history, and made more than one. We did not feel insecure with a woman riding at the head of the army and the rest of the army all men. It didn't make us feel insecure. It would make us feel insecure now. We felt more insecure. The European feels insecure with the woman in power. You cannot measure yourself by his yardstick because he changed the rules of the world to aggrandize himself at your expense. We must find our definition of things. And when we find our definitions of things and begin to honestly look at personalities such as King, we will discover that he was one of the truly great theologians of the 20th century. That he dared to believe in something other people had betrayed. It was a thing of great admiration when he kept expounding on the Judeo-Christian ethic. It was the Judeo-Christian ethic in the hands of whites who had betrayed it that got us into the slave trade. Their concept of the Judeo-Christian ethic differs radically from ours. Their concept of the church differs radically from ours. And if we conducted ourselves in the church and conducted religion in a manner that the church wouldn't be worth going into. And we have to understand that while they palmed off a religion on us, we became true believers of the faith, and we brought to it, and we still bring to it, a sense of humanity over and above anything that they brought to this religion. One of the reasons why we haven't understood Martin Luther King, we are too hung up with "I got a dream" speech quite forget that he also had a plan. That he also challenged his government. That he also brought up the problem of that land. And that he also brought up the problem of the vast amount of money that's being spent in this country for war and the neglect of the poor. And then he advocated a poor people's march on Washington, uniting white poor and black poor. He wasn't saying anything about integration. He got across a basic point that is still true. The same person who makes a white person poor makes a black person poor. He didn't ask them to marry. He didn't ask them to fight each other for dinner. He said they are going to have to put their strength together to deal with a common enemy. And after they have dealt with that common enemy, socially they both can go their separate ways, if that's what they want to do. If they want to be friends, that's all right. If they want to go their separate ways, that's all right. He wasn't talking about integration. That had Martin Luther King lived to bring all this dream, far more important than the dream speech at the March on Washington, had he brought off this dream, he would have been a political force in America 10 times more awesome than Jesse Jackson. He would have put together the common folk in America who have no axe to grind one to the other, because the same person that makes one poor makes the other one poor. We have not looked at this aspect of Martin Luther King's plan. We have not looked at the last 2 years of his existence when he began to have serious problems with the concept of nonviolence, and said so. We had not looked at the time when he began to reassess the dream. What we need to look at is where, when he took that dream and the concept to its lowest ebb, it was so severely criticized, he realized that he had to rethink the concept. After the bombing at Birmingham, the killing of kids in Sunday school, when he went into Birmingham and said, if blood must flow, let it be our blood and not the blood of our white brothers, he was not only wrong, he was wrong. The children had not been buried. This was the time when he could have been confronted this nation and said, so far as nonviolence is concerned, I reserve the right to follow to the end of my days because I believe in it. But I acknowledge the right of my people to have the God-given right of self-defense. This was the time when we should call him home and say, Martin, close the door. Tell the children to go out to play. We adults got some serious talking to do. This is the time when we called him in and said that we have followed you down the non-violent path as long as we could. This day forward, we reserve the right to defend ourselves. In the early days, writing the stories for the Pittsburgh Courier, when I went down to Montgomery, there was a young man who'd married a beautiful little girl, early 20s, called Leela. And I asked him, if someone hit Leela, some cracker hit Leela, spit on her, would you be nonviolent? He looked around to make sure that nobody in the front office was close here. He said, Mr. Clarke, if someone touched this gal of mine, I'm going to take out my knife, I'm going to love her. That way? This way? I'm going to just love them until they bleed to death. Now, he was demonstrating, he was in all the demonstrations now. But the one thing was clear in his mind. He'd be nonviolent until you touch that lady. Mm-hmm. And after that, he's on the warpath. He had worked it out for himself. There was another case where two people engaged, and they went down the store. They all agreed they'd be nonviolent. And the cracker just took out on her, that one girl, burning cigarettes on her arm, called her a bitch, said, "You've never been a virgin since you were 10 years old." She took it all and cried. When they all got back, it was in a circle talking about it. And her boyfriend said, "Well, we didn't fight. We were nonviolent." She crossed the room and gave him his engagement ring. No, we wasn't violent. I think we should have been. At least think you should have been. She told him the engagement is all, and she will not live the rest of her life with a man that permits her to be hurt and humiliated without saying a word. There was time when the dream of nonviolence didn't wear well, and groups pulled away to try to find another way. Now, because I intended to focus on the radical antecedents of the concept of nonviolence, let's look at the historical relationship of the black radical ministry to that concept. Martin Luther King is not new in our history. That concept was over 2,000 years old before he was born. That concept goes back maybe 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, but I can trace it using personalities to Akhenaten. He was a pharaoh, a man who didn't want power. Amenhotep IV, who became Akhenaten. He abhorred violence. He loved life so much he would not crush a flower. He was one of the many priest kings of ancient Egypt. He outlawed warfare. He introduced the concept of monotheism. He did not introduce it so much as to reintroduce the concept that was there all along. Because the concept of the oneness of God, and I've said this before, people think it came from Akhenaten, they are wrong. People think it came from the Hebrews, and they are wrong. The Hebrews heard about it and wrote a literature about it, therefore preserving the concept. But they did not create the concept. It was already there before they entered Africa. Akhenaten, seeing the corruption of the priesthood of that day, the priesthood telling people that your God can only travel so far. When you go beyond that point, you got no protection. Akhenaten would tell them that God is omnipotent. God is all-powerful. God goes everywhere. God protects all life, including the lowly cockroach. God is in everything, including the wind, including the tree. that if you want to pray to God, you can pray to the wind, because God is in the wind. Pray to the tree, because God is in the tree. Most important, pray to yourself, because God is inside of you. All right. He liberated man. He liberated man from the stagnation of the corrupt priesthood. And he told the man, if you are a child of God, then you are part of the flesh and the spirit of God, and God goes with you. So you can just sit and meditate with the God inside of yourself. And you need no leadership of a priest in order to do that. What Akhenaten did was to give people back what they had before. He told the colonies of Egypt, if you don't want to stay a part of Egypt, you don't have to fight for your independence. We just give it to you. And he did. And having given them independence, they pledged allegiance to Egypt. And that allegiance was so strong. Egypt was stronger after that. But some historians have misunderstood this act of courtesy and grandeur, this act of humanity. They've understood it, and they've taken a dislike for Akhenaten because Akhenaten had what we call stereotype Negro features. He did have thick lips, big nose, elongated hair, and yet he was married to one of the most beautiful women who ever lived, according to some historians, Nefertiti. She thought he was so beautiful, she would sneak in the throne room and hide behind the curtain just to take a peek at it. Behold this beautiful man I married. This man left his mark on Egypt. He's starring the special Walter Wagell in his Personalities of Antiquity. He calls his chapter on Akhenaten The Adventures of a Nigger King. He had no question about who he might argue about some of the other kings, but when you look at Akhenaten, there's no argument. What he forget, what some of you forget, is that we are people of diverse physical features. And what they are describing is only one of the many features that we are seen with. In the east coast of Africa, in Ethiopia, Somalia, you will find some Africans whose facial features are identical with that of Europe. And yet their skin is jet black. So inasmuch as they are older than Europe, instead of saying that they've got European features, why don't you look at the Europeans and say, you African features? But we are slow in making claims for ourselves. This, of course, would continue. This kind of ministry. Now, the negative aspect of the 18th dynasty and the reign of Akhenaten, while he built a great spiritual age, he permitted the decline of the physical builder's age that had to be reinstituted in the 19th dynasty by Ramesses II. Now, what you have to understand, Ramesses reigned 66 years, maybe one of the longest reigns in human history. Pepi III, the Pepi II reigned longer, but he was a boy. He came to the throne when he was 5. And, you know, most of the time he wasn't in charge anyway. And when he was in charge, he wasn't great. He didn't do anything great. One of the Pepys is the father of Ramesses, who was great. But Ramesses ruled all the way during that long period. What I'm getting to is that throughout the BC period, there were many kings who advocated peace from a throne, officially. There were many kings who outlawed warfare. They had created, after the disruptive period of, as far as the Hebrew entry, the Hebrew entered Africa during a terrible disruptive period. Africa was invaded soon after that, and they joined the invaders. This is something very few people are willing to deal with. And they're also not willing to separate the European who call themselves Jews from the biblical Jew. The European who call themselves Jew had absolutely nothing to do with the biblical Jew at all. And bloodlines are nothing. They belong to the same religion. When people use the word Semite and Hamite, this is a linguistic term and not a racial term. And nobody can, when people say that you're anti-Semite, you say, am I speaking to a Semite? What is a Semite? Define the word Semite.
Yeah.
The preface to the word proves that there's half of something. Semite. That's half. So the Semitic word, the language, is a mixture of two languages at least. So therefore, a mixture of one or more languages is not a language but a lingua franca created for the sake of trade. Too many times people throw things on you and you can't answer them. So they can throw garbage at you. They can make claims that you can't argue with. In the period after the Christian era, the AD period, several kings came to power on the Niger River, but most known on the Congo River. After the Portuguese had gone into the Congo, went through the motion of finding a partnership, when the Africans discovered that the Portuguese wanted to turn that country to a slave trading country, they threw the Portuguese out. A king came to power, Shambo Belongango. Shambo thought so much of his ministers. This is 1600 to 1620 AD. He thought so much of his ministers he would not argue with them in public for fear their feelings would hurt. This man had great humanity. He saw a person killed with a throwing knife called the assegai.
Mm-hmm.
He outlawed warfare. He sent his people to knitting, his soldiers to knitting. He began the custom of having figurines made of the different royal families. Some of those figurines are in the Brooklyn Museum. The king that followed him, named Bomencheli, when Emil Torti, a Hungarian, was looking to put the chronology of the Congo kings in order, he asked some of the old men what had happened during the reign of the great king that followed Shambo Belongango. They said nothing happened during the reign of Bomencheli except one day the sun went out. Torti understood that the Africans were talking about an eclipse. And if the eclipse happened in the 9th year of his reign, if you could find the year of the eclipse, you could put the aura genealogy of the king in some kind of order. You know the man lived so many years after that. Now you got it in some kind of order. Because this was the rebirth of an artistic age of sculpture. Most of these figurines are in the University of Berlin. I said earlier today, if all the African objects were taken out of certain museums in the world, they would have to close their doors because they would have nothing to show. And that most of the art of Africa, most of the artifacts of Africa, most of the royal regalia of Africa are in museums outside of Africa. Stolen or taken from Africa against the wishes of Africa. This concept would continue. It will continue to some extent into the 1600s in what is now Angola, under Nzinga, until they force her to go to war. It will continue in southern Africa under a king named Karma, a country now called Botswana, used to be called Bechuanaland. It will continue along the coast of East Africa, among the kings who welcomed the Portuguese to their country, only to have the Portuguese turn on them. The Africans who had been nonviolent, who had the moral courage to be nonviolent, were never rewarded by the Europeans, but mostly conquered by the Europeans. Now, having dealt, at least in part, with the African antecedents of Martin Luther King, let's deal with the American antecedents. Because until you deal with the radical black ministry in the United States, you cannot deal with the background to Martin Luther King, because that is his background. The radical black ministry in the United States. Early in New England, where you had the free blacks, free with a question mark, of course, when finally they got tired of going into the back doors of white churches, in the balconies of white churches, going down to have that service after whites. When Richard Allen, James Barrett, and others went to the altar and bowed along with the whites and got thrown out of the church, they knew that they were going to be thrown out. As Rosa Parks knew that she was going to be arrested when she got on that bus. Revolutions are not accident, they have to be planned. They found the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Look at the word Africa now appearing. We were not afraid of the word Africa. This is before we start using a word called color and Negro. We have overused the word black. Black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are. There are many Africans as anybody who are not black in complexion and who are not mixed with Arabs and not mixed with Europeans. I know who's mixed with Europeans, who's mixed with Arabs. I'm not dealing with them. I'm dealing with a certain African culture groups, mistakenly called tribes, but they are light complected people in some of their groups, among the Zulus, sometimes among the Igbo. And I'm talking about the offsprings of foreigners. So if you see a person in Africa, you say he can't be in Africa unless he's jet black. there are some African groups where the entire group tends to be medium brown. That's where the entire group tends to be dark brown. There are other Africans, but every single human being in the group is jet black. We have to deal with these variations in African culture, the variations in the manner of African people. Now let's go back to the American antecedents, the radical New England free man establishing a church in Charlotte. Let's look at the fact of Prince Hall, Barbadian. Someone told him that if you were a minister, you get respect, so he became a minister. Nothing changed. You own property, you get respect, so he bought property. Nothing changed. So if you own some, if you head of an organization, you could change things. So he organized the first black Masonic order. What did he call it? The Black Mason? No. He called it the African Lodge. We wasn't afraid of the word African. My point of reference in using this is that these men, too, was as nonviolent as Martin Luther King and was as radical as Martin Luther King. They knew then that violence would be suicide, and that they had nothing to fight with, that they were surrounded by enemies, and so they began an approach that was basically nonviolent. They were not cowards. They would fight if there was a fighting chance out there. So they began the slow petition. And these radical ministers would continue throughout the first half of the 19th century, mostly under the influence of Frederick Douglass. Some of them the lieutenants of Frederick Douglass, especially Henry Highland Garnett, Ringo Ward, Samuel Ringo Ward. This is the period that produced both a violent and non-violent reaction to our condition. It was also the period of the Gabriel Prosser Revolt, period of the Denmark 1800, Denmark-Vesey Revolt, 1822, the Nat Turner Revolt, 1831. Gabriel Prosser was an amateur preacher, so was Denmark-Vesey, so was Nat Turner. Now you see a radical black ministry playing a role in slave revolt. This would continue until after the Civil War. The black ministry would emerge again, building churches, building institutions, being the negotiating factor between the black community and the police, the authority, using the church not only as a place where you pray, but a place where you spotted the girl you want to marry, you was baptized, or you did your coding, and a place where you could hide from the law, because the law would not generally search the church. Now these radical black ministers, who many times stood in front of the church and said, ain't nobody in here, told a lie and asked God to forgive them, risked their life to protect black people. Look at the role the minister is playing. The minister has been a part of our revolution. We have to separate those who are part of our revolution and those who just be collection plates. Two types. Those who are on the line, those who just giving out emotion but not giving out direction. And to make this clear separation. Near the end of the 19th century, we saw the emergence of a radical black minister who needs to be remembered, Bishop Henrik McNeil Turner, a dynamo from Georgia.
Yeah.
He thought, because he was half white, he would have some privileges. When he understood that he had no more privilege than the blackest of the black, he put all of his illusions behind him and began to fight. He would mount the American flag in his pulpit before he started his preach. And for 15 minutes before his sermon, he would point to that flag and say, "This flag ain't nothing but a G.D. rag." So what has been done to his people under this flag? That flag has blood on it. That flag has the blood of your grandmother. That flag has the sweat of your grandfather and his blood. When he finished preaching that short sermon against the flag, then he would go to preach his graduate sermon. Henry McNeil Turner took people back to Africa, more people than God. Clarke has done an excellent job in a book called Black Exodus, Bishop Turner's African Dream. But when we look at Martin Luther King, we need to look at these radicals. We need to look at, because Martin Luther King relates to the radical black ministry. And if we look at all of this, and look at the fact that Martin Luther King stayed our hand at a time where violence would have been suicide. And he saw the concept of nonviolence turn obsolete before his eyes. And he knew this, and beginning to chart another course of action that would have made him an international politician. We have certain mistaken notions about him that we need to clear up. He was an admirer of Mahatma Gandhi. He was not a follower of Mahatma Gandhi, and he did not know Mahatma Gandhi with any degree of thoroughness, nor did any person around him know Mahatma Gandhi with any degree of thoroughness. Mahatma Gandhi was an East Indian racist. Mahatma Gandhi was a nationalist. King was a universalist. King believed in all people and the universal brotherhood of all people, which is ideal. Gandhi was practical. Gandhi believed in India, 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 and India. Gandhi didn't even have a good word to say about the Chinese next door being kicked around by the Japanese. Never said one word about it. Gandhi gave his people an economic incentive the king never outlined. When the British were charging too much for salt, he had his famous salt march to the sea. He told his people that salt is as plentiful as sand. He bankrupted the British Salt Company by this single act. And while he said he's non-violent, he had a violent alternative waiting in the wing. The Sikhs in the northern frontiers of India, who held knives so well you think all of them were born surgeons. And he told the British, if you don't deal with me, you got to deal with them. When he told 50,000 Indians to lay on the train and dare the train to move over you, he knew what he was doing. He had alerted the fireman, even if the engineer was English, that fireman was alerted. If that train goes near those bodies, that fireman would have to buy himself another head. That engineer would have to buy himself another head. Well, that was going on. Gandhi had his spies everywhere. Gandhi was devious and vicious. I'm not blaming him. Gandhi had a nation to free. Gandhi was willing to free that nation by any means necessary. If Gandhi had to lie, he would lie. He was committed to the liberation of India. Most of his fasts were fakes. He was never going to die. He told the British, I'll eat no hard food. I just sip a little goat's milk. Now, if you know goats, and if you can dismiss all the propaganda about goats being scavengers, and they are not, goats eat very selective. They eat the top of the grasses. Sheep come along and eat the grasses to the nub. The goats just eat the juicy tops. Goat's milk is some of the best, the most nutritious milk you can have. You can sip goat's milk and live indefinitely. Now, King never would have put a job back like that. But why I don't know numerology. Each time Gandhi would make so many demands on the British was an odd figure. His famous 17 demands, and his 21 demands. He would have 7 demands that he knew wasn't going to be accepted. And once the British knocked off 7 and gave him the rest, the British would beat that breast. Well, we didn't give him everything he asked for. He didn't expect everything he was asking for. He was a child politician. But the next time he made demands, the 7 that they knocked off the last time on the first on the list the next time. Till they finally got it back to everything he wanted. And when Sir Sanford Clarke visited India, and they asked him to give us a date for Indian independence, when he failed to give the date, Indian army officers communicated with all the army. India had 1 million people under arms. They communicated with everybody in the army. And they finally told the British, if we don't get a date for independence, we will turn this rebel army into a revolutionary army and drive you into the sea. All right. Then the British gave them a date. All this was cleared with Gandhi. So Gandhi's non-violent alternative had worked. Martin Luther King had a violent alternative, but he never used it, and he wouldn't have dared to use it. That violent alternative was Big Bad Malcolm and the Nation of Islam. They were ready to protect it, were ready to move in behind. But he would reject that. I'm not blaming him. I'm saying that Martin Luther King was a different kind of moral human being. In many ways, he was too good for the age in which he lived. Too good for the people that he had to deal with. Nonviolence would only work with the people who have the moral courage to believe in it. His enemies didn't believe in it. In the march at government of the United States that those young people would not be trampled on. They got to the bridge, and the horses just ran right over it. After that, they pulled out. Many of these snake people pulled out and formed a separate organization based on black consciousness. Now, I'm not talking about something I research now, because I'm talking about something I was a part of.
Oh, yeah.
The black consciousness paper was developed in my office in the anti-poverty program, How You Act, in Harlem. And I still got a copy. It was taken, we had a meeting in New Orleans. We didn't stay in hotels. We stayed in the community. No one knew how many of us was there. We went to one place. This place said, I can sleep 2. One place said, I can feed 6. One said, I can sleep some, but I can't feed any. Until everybody got situated. A restaurant called Chevy Chase, one of the best black restaurants in New Orleans. And if you go there and miss it, you're missing a good meal, because they know how to cook. She would feed the greater number of them for nothing, mind you. There was a black gangster called Big Time Clarke. We could use his pool room in the day because there's nobody in there in the day. At night we would use the basement of the Y. And any person over 21 could come to his bar and get a drink. This kind of cooperation between the community set in motion the black consciousness concept. Different scholars went down to New Orleans to attend this concept, to attend these conferences. And they were told not only to pay your own way, but bring a contribution to the movement. And we did.
Yes, he's asleep.
The next day, the next year, the meeting was in Selma, 18 miles from the nearest telephone, in the backwoods.
He's out like a
Ku
little...
Klux Klan praying on us every night.
Oh.
At the Black Conscious Movement in New Orleans, there was a young man called Stokely Carmichael, just sitting by observing things. At the movement in Selma, meetings in Selma, same Stokely Carmichael, standing by and observing things, reading as much as he could. That's the origin of the concept of black power. Right there, from the black consciousness papers of those two conferences. Stokely don't deny it. Other people deny it. But the people who made it don't deny it at all. Now, this group had now raised some serious questions about the leadership of Martin Luther King over the concept of nonviolence that they considered obsolete. The last 2 years of Martin Luther King's life, he too began to consider and reconsider the concept of nonviolence. His association with those protesting the war in Vietnam, his speech at Riverside Drive, Riverside Church, his association with the garbage strike in Memphis, his advocacy of a Poor People's March on Washington, all of this would put Martin Luther King on a collision course with the powers that be. The FBI, dead on him because J. Edgar Hoover hated blacks, communists, and women. In what order? We don't know. So, J. Edgar Hoover was inventing things. There was a book called The King That God Did Not Create. It didn't sell, and maybe it's for the best. because it was made from a whole lot of information taken from the FBI. The FBI did not want the emergence of a strong black leadership in this country, be it minister or non-minister. They did not want to see a leadership that will show people the real face of power and what to do about it. Each time a leader emerges that shows his people the real face of power and what to do about it, he is either driven to suicide, driven into exile, or assassinated. Go back to David Walker, the mysterious death of David Walker. We have not looked into the mysterious death of Booker T. Washington yet. We don't investigate things enough. We haven't even looked into the man who killed Martin Luther King. We haven't looked into the fact that we do not protect people who protect us. In other words, how could a white man in a white Jaguar come into a black neighborhood, kill a black man, and get away? One sharpshooter would have cut him down. Now, concurrent with Martin Luther King, look at Martin Luther King's death, look at Malcolm's death, look at Lumumba's death, look at the overthrow of the Nkrumah government. He was a part of an international thing, and an international conspiracy against black leadership everywhere. Look at the breaking up of the Caribbean Federation. Look at the beginning of the decline of the Civil Rights Movement. Look at them being bought off by, many of them being bought off by the anti-poverty program with high salaries. All of this, they saw something in us that we have not seen yet. We are the focal point of a new world power. If we claim those things that belong to us, those lands that belong to us, we wouldn't have to claim anything that belonged to other people. We can emerge into the world again, and we can do it with morality because we don't have to conquer other people to do it. Martin Luther King was pointing direction, moral direction. We will never know what Martin Luther King could have become. We will never know what Malcolm X could have become, because they were both cut down while they were still growing. They were not only growing, but they was growing in their capacity to understand each other, because both of them were traveling the same road using different methods. And while there was an attempt to create a conflict one to the other, they did not see any great conflict and any great cleavage, any great difference. They had a difference of opinion over nonviolence. Of course, they didn't see that as a great conflict. My main point is that we must look beyond Martin Luther King's dream, and we must take the dream into a new reality. We must memorialize Martin Luther King our way. If he is being memorialized by our enemies, then I fear he's being memorialized for reasons that has no value to us. I dissent in relationship to the holiday because I think it should have been something we made all by ourselves without any government interference. We should have made a week leading to the Memorial Day. We should not have called it a holiday. We should look at the values of the man. We should listen to the speeches of the man on that particular day. We should look at the truths and see to what extent we can live by. We should take from his life what wasn't finished and finish those jobs in his memory. We need to be honest with him and honest with ourselves. We need to place him where he needs to be placed, one of the great voices of the 20th century, who stood astride our movement from the bus boycott through the March on Washington, and began to make that change after the March on Washington, the change that ultimately will lead to his death. We need to see him as a sacrificial man. He did not and he's gone. So if we were as brave as he was, the chances are we wouldn't be here talking about it. We would have put our life on the line, and some of us at least would have been gone. I see Martin Luther King as a revolutionist, a special kind of revolutions that stem from the revolutionary nature of our church. And I think when we forget all of the smut and the rumors, we can take from his life some revolutionary spirit, and each individual one of us can make our own revolution. And to find an ally for that revolution, I advise you to find a mirror and see who's staring back at you, and say to that person that staring back at you, you and I can change the world.
Right.
You and I can make a revolution, and you and I will do it right now.
That's right.
Thank you.
John Henrik Clarke. Dr. Clarke. Dr. Clarke, do you want to do a question and answer? Or?
I can do it now if you want.
Okay. You see, Dr. a brilliant young man, and he's got a lot to say. We urge you to come out to that. Dr. Clarke, you have often spoke to us on the subject of what we need to do, and behind what we did, what happened yesterday. You often spoke to us about the economics that we need to get into. And I'm quite sure there were some people here who didn't hear that statement. And to me, that was a profound statement, because you often made that statement about just having a shoe factory. Would you expound on that theory that you said about what we need to do economically to make ourselves strong, as well as the cultural aspect of it?
I have been singing this song for
Excuse me, Dr. Clarke. Those people who were in the back and those who were standing up, out of respect to our elder,
to build an economic system among the people, you have to begin by making the things you need. I think we should begin by making our underwear. A people who cannot make their underwear cannot build a nation. Then we start with our shoes. Then we start growing the food we eat. We move from that point on. We have to study the rise of modern Japan, how it survived a war, 2 atomic bombs, and now the people who defeated them are now begging them for economic space in the world. How did they do it? There are 2 things they failed to let people take away from them: their self-confidence and their concept of God as they devised them to be. The two main things that were taken away from you. The whole thing is whether you can rule a nation is how much knowledge do you have of the time when you did rule one. And how much knowledge you have when you ruled a nation well. Our children need to know that this is something we not only did, but something we practically invented. The concept of nation structure and nation rule. And we ruled with great humanity. And we ruled a diversity of people within the structure of nations without one being at odds with the other. This is why history is so important. We have to find out what we have done in order to find out what we still have to do. First, we got to regain some confidence in ourselves and some basic respect for ourselves, our history, and transfer this to our children.
Is there anyone else that has a question for Dr. Clarke this evening? Sister.
Dr. Clarke, if Christianity is an African religion, how was someone else able to come along and enslave us with our own religion?
Because they dressed it up and gave it to us as something new. I think in Ben Yakinen's African origins of major Western religions, the proof is there. But in John Jackson's book, Christianity Before Christ, is more precise. They could do it because they would tell us that this is something distinctly new and better, and some of us would fall for it. We don't examine schemes and ceremonies that's handed to us. The man that sold it to us wasn't a Christian himself and didn't believe in it himself. And yet, because it's so closely related to what we already had, he didn't find much difficulty in convincing us that this was something new and this was something vital, with an element of control. I think Christianity, as we know it, is a carbon copy. I'm for going back to the original copy.
Anyone else?
Dr. Clarke, you had mentioned that the Semites, you had discussed something about the Semites. How did the European get to be known as the Semite that they are claiming today?
The same way he got to be known as a superior human being. He declared himself. When you declare yourself something, nobody disputes you. And in the outside, you become what you've declared yourself to be.
Mr. Brother.
This is in response to the last thing. You said that we needed a copy of Christianity. What?
I said that Christianity is a carbon copy.
Right.
And I said that I go back to the original copy. When I say I go back to the original copy, it means that I go back to the spirituality that was used before Christianity that I consider to be higher than Christianity.
I was going to ask.
Go ahead.
What would you propose that we do as far as going back to that?
Study. If you want to really go back to it, you have to study the basic life and text that created it. The documents that came out of the mystery school in Egypt. You have to study a book mistakenly called the Book of the Dead, which is the book of affirmation. You must study the different books and papyri that came out of the period, the different teaching books. Because the Hebrews, you studied this literature and extracted from it what you know as the Bible. The Hebrews and the Greeks and put it all together, made it into literature. I'm not against the Bible. I'm not against religion of any kind. But I'm saying that Western religion is rationality. And all Western religion is male chauvinist. Western religion and rationality is rationality. Spirituality is reason.
And Dr. Clarke, I want to know, what is the possibility of the entire New Testament being written in Hebrew before it was written in Greek?
You still hung up with somebody else's interpretation of something. Never mind writing it in Hebrew. Let's write it in Wolof or Yoruba. See how it sounds. The African believed in supreme being, but the African also believed in helpers to the supreme being. If you had a god of fertility for the male, then that same God wasn't responsible for fertility for the female. The Catholic Church comes along and assigns saints, and you accept that. Yet you can't look at Shango, or the Damari, or the African God.
Yeah.
You call that primitive. What the Africans did is that he don't overwork any God. He divides the work.
Yeah.
The sun god don't have to worry about the rain. The Catholic Church has a saint, especially for sailors. Saint for the poor. And when they break it up and call it saints, you accept that. But the Africans have been doing that all along. The idea that it's hard for you to look at yourself as the giver of greatness. Somebody else's lifestyle. Neglect your own.
Anyone else? Well, once again, it's been one of them historic evenings with Dr. John Henry Clarke. And just listening to him in just them little phases, that's why he reminds me of the great musician Charlie Parker. Because Charlie Parker never played a tune the same way, and everybody else came along and tried to do it and could not do it. And even sometimes when musicians got on the stand, they didn't know where he was going, and they said it sounded wrong, but it came out right. And the great European professors and maestros said, he's playing wrong. But it always came out right. And they're still trying to copy Charlie Parker. Just the way he just answered those questions was my statement by what I say to him. He's the Charlie Parker of the historians. And that's my statement. Now, you don't have to agree with me. That's how I feel about it. But let us stand and give this great man a round of applause. Thank him once again for his presence here at the House of Lord Church. And we know he will be back. I'm going to turn the mic over to Reverend George to close us out.
chance. 3 more questions, and then the panelists ask each other some questions. Just a minute, bro. Sisters first. No problem.
My question is for Miss Ali. She states on page 72. My question, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, my question is for Miss Ali.
She's not here.
Okay, well, your representatives are people who are qualified.
This panel ain't got nothing to do with this. Ask a general question.
Okay. Well, I'm asking this question of her, but she is not here, so I'm going to ask the question of the people who are pro the book. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. On page 72, where she says that some black women are so removed from these types of historical roots that they blame all their problems on the black man, the other victim of this racial conspiracy. I found, is this not what this book is doing? In a sense, blaming the problems on black women that are the same victims of racial conspiracy. Okay. Did you understand what I said to panels? Because I heard a statement from you being that it was a terrible question, but she's saying that we are blaming our problems on the black man who was a victim of racial conspiracy. This book is blaming the problems on the black woman who is also a victim of racial conspiracy.
All right, okay. What she said, man. What she said.
Sister, I think that once we lose sight of the purpose of the book, this is why we have the confusion. I don't think, and I don't believe that this sister is speaking about all black women. I don't believe this. I know what she does not say. I know that. And that's why I'm trying to tell you. Okay, I'm saying, but if you have an understanding and a knowledge of yourself, I believe that you would understand where the sister's coming from. No. Wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Even though you said that the sister said that, I don't remember all of the question, but she states that, say that again, 72, about blaming the black man.
Blaming the black man for the conspiracy.
I think I have to go back on the premise of that you have to understand the purpose of the book and what she's trying to identify. And so in order to, I know, but I'm telling you, you have to be, she said some black women, not all black women. So,
People read words. Words is not it.
go ahead.
All right, I don't understand what you really got.
But let her speak. Look. Sis, you asked one, hold up. You asked one question.
But she wants me to speak correctly. She wants me to
Look, you asked the question.
Let the question. Take it out of context.
No, you said, no, I'm asking you a question. The question is that, okay, she says some black women blame the problems, all their problems on black men who are victims, are merely victims of racial conspiracy. I'm asking you, is this not how we are? We are victims of racial conspiracy, yet she, in this book, even in the first IV4, where she states that black women are a direct cause for the destruction of the black family, there was no sum in that statement, my sister. Sister, the mere fact that the word is made singular is that you have to identify with what she's saying. And if you don't identify
curtain and put the man behind the curtain, could you talk and understand each other? If I put the woman behind the curtain and the man behind the curtain, and I said talk to each other, could you understand what they're talking about?
Now, I'm just picking up this mic to make sure I understand you. Your question was, if you put the man behind the curtain and the woman behind the curtain, would we understand what they're talking about? Now, I'm asking you, are you saying to me that if this were written about a man like it's written about a woman, would the women understand? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying to you is that we are a physical power. You see, we are a spiritual people.
True.
But this is not dealing with the physical being. It's two different beings. So now we got to understand that we're not physical, we're spiritual. That's reasonable.
So in other words, you made a statement and didn't answer the question, and your statement is
But I have to make.
your statement is correct, and I respect it.
Okay. All right. Let's move on.
My question is directed at the panel, both pro and con, and to the audience. Now, what I don't understand, I've been in this environment, this school, many times. Harry Tubman, strong woman, many times in reference to programs that Patricia Lumumba Coalition was putting together, the 712 Coalition, and the Bangor Hema Harriet Tubman Coalition. Now, this place is packed. Where were you then when Michael Steele was murdered? Where were you? Where were you? Where were you when Elmer Butler was murdered? Question. All right, hold on. All right, one more. Let me say something. You need to answer questions. Any subject matter, but don't say anything. We don't need no statements. All right. Question. All right. In reference to the book, Pro and Con, what is your position pro? What is your position con in terms of raising revolutionary men and women to destroy this racist institution, this racist system in this country? I think this is counterproductive. I think we should raise revolutionary children that pick up a damn gun and kill the damn bastards that killed Yusuf Hawkins. Sit down, brother. You asked the question. If you didn't want to ask the question, why'd you get up and waste the time? But however, I'll answer you on your way out. The reason why the brothers and sisters weren't here during the time that Lombian is doing what they're doing is because the central core of this conversation has to do with black men and black women related, and not to how communism, socialism, and all that kind of stuff plays. As to black men and black women packing the joint here tonight, it is, excuse me, listen, did you have your say? Did you have your say? I'm answering you. Let me say I'm not awake and you are. Okay, brother, please, don't look like a little boy. Don't act like a little boy. Sit down. All right, okay. Okay, but I have to answer this question. The most revolutionary
sister brings up are true and the black man says that it's true, then what must we do?
I'll respond.
Anybody?
I have to go back to the point that I've been trying to make all evening, and that is that the problem with the book is that you've got some half-truths in there, you've got some stereotypes. And because of that, you cannot get to the issues. It is obvious, just based on the increase in the number of female-headed households that have taken place in the last 20 years, based on the number of young children having babies and all those other kinds of things, that there are problems that exist between black men and black women. But before we can come together to sit down and to listen to what's happening, we need to know what the problem is. This book, I'm sorry to say, does not give us the information because it has all of the half-truths in it. And because of that,